Well, hello everyone. This is Kevin Tomlinson with Self Publishing Insiders, and we have, of course, Mark Leslie Lefebvre off to my right, and down below us, Nick Thacker, a good friend of Draft to Digital. I should have let you guys introduce. We always do the whole everybody introduces themselves thing, and I blew it. Sorry, guys, but well, I'm glad we're all able to hang out today on this blistering cold day, at least in our part of the world. Except for Nick, who's in Hawaii. So, so we have Mark. You're up way north. You and I are bookending the country. We're the bread on the U.S. sandwich. You're in the frozen north, and I'm in the frozen south right now. And Nick is sort of the pickle off to the side.
Yeah, the side of the plate.
I'm the toothpick you take off before you eat the sandwich.
Now, and Alyssa, who works with us at Draft to Digital, has popped in on YouTube to say hello from snowy Oklahoma. And it is not unusual in my experience for there to be snow in Oklahoma, but it is unusual for there to be snow in Texas, especially the parts of Texas that I hail from. So there's no snow, but there is enough sleet and ice on the trees outside this hotel room that it is a wintry wonderland out there. So kind of unusual. So speaking of unusual, how are you guys doing?
Well, clearly he was talking to Mark, but I'll go ahead and answer since I'm probably more unusual than everyone else. I'm doing well, man. I'm doing good. I miss these kind of things. I miss doing live stuff with you, Kevin. I miss I miss the invitation that I know Mark has sent me 500 times to come live on his shows. I'm just positive he sent them. I know I've just missed them. So I apologize for missing those, Mark.
Man, it's the time difference. When I'm ready to have a drink live, you're already sleeping.
Hey, don't put me in a box, man. I'm a writer, so you could, it could be 9 a.m. for me, and I'll drink with you if that's what it takes. I'll do it.
Yeah,
just for you.
Yeah. When Mark and I started working together at Draft to Digital, we no longer invited each other to each other's shows. So those avenues are closed, I guess. Why not?
It felt like nepotism or something. So we're like, I don't know about this.
It did. It felt wrong. It's the same reason I haven't had like Dan Wood or anybody else on. Of course, I kind of put Wordslinger on a hiatus there for a while. So, but let's get into things because people aren't tuning in to hear our personal woes and podcasting woes, but they are here hopefully to talk about improving and honing your writing craft. The three of us happen to be authors, and I think we can all safely say we do fairly well at the author business, and part of that is marketing, of course, and marketing is something we talk about all the time in every avenue at Draft to Digital, because it's the one thing authors want to know about the most. But there is a component to writing that is simply about the craft. And when we say that, we mean, the actual skills of writing, the actual shaping of story, little things like plotting and, characterization and that sort of thing. And I'm actually writing a series on our blog. It started this week about characterization, better characterization. And you can see the first post at draftedigital.com/blog right now. And that's going to be a fun exploration. It actually started out as it was going to be 2 posts, and I think it's up to 5 now. So there's only 1 on the website at the moment, but I went a little overboard for the exploration of characterization. But so when it comes to now, and by the way, everybody watching this and tuning in live, be sure you ask us anything. We can take your questions. We're gonna kind of just go back and forth with things as we go along here, but we're happy to take questions on craft or anything else that strikes your fancy. We'll try to answer everything. So please be sure to ask your questions. If you're listening to the podcast, you missed out on the live questions, but that doesn't mean you're going to miss out. You can go and go to d2dlive.com to make sure you catch up on the on future broadcasts of Self-Publishing Insiders. And you can always pop over to our blog, our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, and ask us any questions you want there too. So we're happy to help you out. So, okay. So talking about craft, the first thing I wanted to do, and I have a little something to guide us if we need it, but I think the three of us know the business and the the art of this well enough that we can kind of speak off the cuff if we want. But how do you guys perceive writing craft? Mark, let's start with you. How do you define craft? And sorry, I'm wearing a Drafted Digital hat in the video. They self-publishing insiders official hat, I guess.
It's like the brim with a message there, except yours doesn't say. Aloha.
That's right. I have to duck down so you can see my my mug. But Mark, how do you look at craft?
I mean, craft is a thing. I mean, I remember when I first got into writing, I first started writing, it was reading craft books. It was, now everyone's hiding. It's just me. It was nothing but just the craft of writing. And I realized the more I wrote, the better I got at the craft. So I think of craft as an ongoing exercise that you're always learning, always getting better. And I get better from a combination of sort of 3 or 4 things. Main one is reading a lot, reading a ton of books, understanding the different books that I love, what I love about them, what I don't love about them. Writing a lot, because the more I write, the better I am at my craft. And it's just that practice. It's the constant drills. And then it's also, I'm continuing to get books on the craft of writing, and it's on dialogue, on character, on setting, on structure. And I think Sasha Black just recently, I just got her, a book about super bad villains and about good guys, and then also about prose, because it doesn't matter that I've been writing. Let's not talk about how many decades I've been writing, but there's constantly always something to learn. So for me, craft is an ongoing target that I'm never going to hit, and I'm constantly going to be better every time I sit down at the keyboard.
I love that answer, Mark. Literally said one of the words that I was going to throw in there. I'm sorry. Am I on a delay, guys? My bad. Am I on a delay? I must be on a huge delay.
No, I think you're in the spotlight, dude.
My bad. Sorry, guys.
Nope. I think I'm having some internet issues. So.
Oh, wonderful. Sorry about that. Yeah, Mark, you said the word that I would. I think that will always fall from my lips when somebody asks about craft, or really writing in marketing in general, and that's practice. I don't think that practice is craft, and there's obviously a difference between the words. But I was trained as a musician. I have a trombone degree. You're welcome. Everybody needs to know somebody with a trombone degree. You imagine how useless that is. But I grew up learning how to practice. Middle school band all the way through college degrees, and we used to say this. Obviously not a quote from us, but somebody said that amateurs practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. So when I'm writing, I think to myself, man, is this something that whatever I'm trying to do with this craft, am I trying to make a scene believable? Am I trying to make the bad guy come across as a good guy, or vice versa? And why, and doing that? And am I doing this in the way that's the absolute best way possible? Have I practiced enough at this sort of thing to be able to pull that off and just know that it's going to work? The answer most of the time for me personally is no, I haven't practiced that enough, because we as writers don't really have a good way to practice other than just writing more and more books, which is certainly valid, but there's no such thing as authors that just will write an entire book and then throw it in the trash can solely for practice. Like, that just isn't something we do. I'm not necessarily advocating for that. I think we should publish books and get them out there, but I cannot separate the idea of practice from craft. And so I love what you said, Mark, about there's always something more to learn. There's always something more to do. There's always something more to explore as a writer.
Love that. Looks like we have Kevin.
You guys are
I'm
sorry. I don't know. And I think my internet connection here in the hotel may not be as great as I had hoped. So I apologize if I drop out. You guys can more than carry this if I disappear again. But you guys are completely wrecking the little slides that I had built, because you basically just went through every single one of them in your intro. I want to, while I'm here and not disappearing, I want to try to answer. We can jump in and answer a couple of questions. So this one actually is not about craft, but we can certainly answer this. Does a book automatically connect to Findaway Voices from your Drafted Digital account, or will I have to connect it manually? And this is coming in from Tulane on YouTube. And well, it is not automatically connected, but you can use us to import or basically port it over to Find a Way with essentially the press of one button. I mean, it's not very difficult. Once you've reached the end of the process of publishing your ebook, for example, you usually get this little pop-up that says, do you want to start a print book? Do you want to start an audio book? And you can, if you're in D2D print, you'll get that print notification. But from the ebook, you can port it on over to Find a Way Voices with all the metadata and everything intact. So you can do that from there. And we have a video on that on YouTube. So you should be able to find that if you search our YouTube channel at youtube.com/draft2digital. And you can always email us at support@draft2digital.com to get some more info. Here's a question from Casey, also from YouTube. Is 40,000 words too short for a novel? Nick, would you like to answer this?
This reminds me of when Kevin and I co-wrote a series together many moons ago. I kept referring to his published novels as novellas because I wasn't entirely clear on what I thought a full-length novel was. He kept
my 60,000 word novels, by the way.
yeah. These were certainly in the realm of full-length novels, but I kept calling them cute little novellas. Totally unpretentiously, I might add.
You could call them novelettes. Those are even shorter.
Novelette. Yeah. I think, Casey, this is one of those points of contention for writers. And so I don't really want to get into the weeds of trying to define what is or isn't a novel, because that's just a word. And different smarter people than I have come up with their own definitions. In my world, which is thrillers, action, adventure, Clive Cussler type stuff, Dan Brown, 40,000 words is probably too short to call a full-length novel. And so what I'm getting at is that depending on what you're writing, what genre, there's expectations that readers have for how long a book should be. And if you're not hitting those expectations, if you're writing sweet romance and there's not a happy ending, then you're not really writing sweet romance. There's some genre expectations, right? And so it's the same with length. I think 40,000 words for a thriller is going to be too short. Get 20,000 more, 25,000 more words, then you kind of get into a short thriller, but absolutely a full-length novel. My books, I know Kevin's books, in that genre are typically 80 to 100,000 words.
Right. Mark, what about you? What's your typical word count?
I usually am in the 60 to 85,000 word realm when I want to call it a novel. I will call it a short novel if it goes below 55. Because I write a lot of speculative fiction, I've always used the SFWA, Science Fiction Writers of America designation for short story, novelette, novella, novel. But I even still call some of my stuff, this is a short novel, because you're going to be able to, like, the reading time or whatever is maybe 4 or 5 hours as opposed to 8 to 10 to 12. So, but again, as Nick says, it's really about the reader expectation. And I think there's another question about Casey asks, just maybe as a follow-up while we're on this, talking about when agents talk about numbers of pages, how many words per page are they talking about? And I think I'm not really good at numbers of pages because of fonts and everything, but using standard manuscript format, 12-point fonts, usually the specific kind of fonts that they're looking for. What is what is that, 350 words per page, or what's the?
Yeah, it's 250, but is it 350?
If you're using like Times New Roman 12-point type and your margins are like, I think it's ½ on left and right, it's typically going to be between, actually there's a range. It's like between 250 and 350. And I used to say 500 because I guess I had my margins set really narrow. So all my pages were 500 words. But if you're font, right? That's right, exactly right. So yeah, if you aim for the 300 mark, you're probably going to be about right if you're looking at that for page count. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter. A lot of programs like Scrivener, for example, will give you both the printed page count and the estimated paperback page count. So you can use that to get a pretty decent estimate. Most people don't look at page page count, though. Most people are looking for a word count for these things, because then they can plug that number in to whatever formula they use internally. And Mark makes a very good point, is in that various organizations have their own definition of what a minimum length for a novel is. If you are participating in like NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, the target for a book in that competition is 50,000 words. So if you just use that as your minimum target, you're probably going to be okay in most instances. But Nick's absolutely right. That stuff only applies, it applies by genre. And so kind of get familiar with what the standard word length is for your genre. Although I will say, in the thriller genre, Ian Fleming's books weighed in at around 40,000 words.
That's true. Yeah, there's always the exception that proves the rule, right?
Yeah,
and,
what has he ever done that I was ever
right, James Bond, but yeah, exactly.
Ian Fleming, by the way, if you don't know, is the author of the James Bond series. So
the autobiographical James Bond series, I would say, for Ian Fleming.
Is it really his autobiographical? Background. I mean,
no, but I mean, he was basically James Bond.
Yeah. Now, by the way, Alyssa is doggedly answering these questions in the comments. So if we don't give you a satisfactory answer, and we might occasionally give you an answer that's contradictory to her answer, just go with her answer. Here's a comment from Richard on Facebook. I just finished the first draft of an epic fantasy novel, 148,000 words. Fantasy writers can say hello in under 5,000. Can't say hello in under 5,000 words, which is absolutely true.
And now you know why I don't write fantasy, ladies and gentlemen.
This is why I don't write epic fantasy. Although a good friend of ours, Ernie Dempsey, just wrote a thriller that was like 140,000 words.
Yeah. So. I mean, I've definitely done that, but it's not on purpose.
What's that, Mark?
Wasn't it a fantasy thriller?
A fantasy thriller. Is that where we are now? So speaking of genres, when it comes to writing craft, now I've done cross-genre writing. I think Mark, you have as well, and Nick's done some, at least with sci-fi and thrillers.
Yeah.
How does that shift and change the way you handle and approach craft? Who wants to answer that first?
I think
I'm going to pick somebody. How about you, Mark?
Okay. Yeah. So, depending on, like Nick mentioned romance, right? So you can't have a proper romance without the expectation of a happy ending, right? You can't have a thriller without the expectation of some high stakes and some suspense, and not being sure whether or not the heroes are going to survive or win or defeat the whatever. And oftentimes you can't have horror without a sense of fear or foreboding or dread or darkness. Sometimes with, again, those high stakes. Thinking about science fiction, fantasy, there's specific tropes. So I think when you're approaching the genre, you're always, and this is really, really critical, is understanding what it is that has drawn a reader to the genre, and making sure you're given the expectations. I'm going to take this back to a writing exercise that I really like to play with. And because I've edited anthologies and I've had the opportunity to read stories from really, really good writers that can kind of play on, you give them a theme or a single theme. Love, for example. I did an anthology on fear and another one on love. And the fear one was not meant to be a horror anthology. It was that these are books about fear. All I wanted was to feel fear when I read them, and I wanted stuff from across genres. And so you can take fear and you can do it for suspense. It can be in a romance story. It's the fear of that relationship not working out or whatever. And then similarly, you can take something like love. And we even have on our books to read page right now this brilliant listing of all of these different books that it's love stories. And the whole idea is not necessarily romance, although romance is a big part of it, but different kinds of love. Bromance, right? Love. It could be the love that a parent has for a child. It could be the love, like when you think of Marley and Me and a story like that love between a pet and human. And that's the kind of thing that when I think about different genres and different approaches, is taking a scene or a setting or something like a fixed thing, and then approaching it from fantasy, approaching it from science fiction, approaching it from romance, and seeing how the exact same little incident can be driven by the elements of the genre. And for me, that's a great writing exercise to make sure that I'm sort of picking up the right pen when I'm writing those scenes.
What
Yeah,
about you,
go with
Nick?
what Mark said.
All right, and that's been
good
this
stuff.
week's Self-Publishing
And that's it.
Insider. Everybody.
Great. The only thing I would say that I'm kind of I'm chewing on right now in my own career is that I'm not entirely sure thriller is a genre. You know, I say I write in the thriller genre, and we all know what that means because there's literally a genre link we can click on Amazon or whatever store to go get into mysteries and thrillers, and I write in that sub niche, right? But here's the deal: I started drafting and outlining a book on how to write thrillers, and I couldn't quite nail down what that was. Yeah, sure, there's tropes. But those tropes aren't really for thrillers as much as they're for the genre beneath the thriller, which is like action adventure in my case, or mystery in some cases, detective mystery. And so what I'm getting at is I think this cross genre stuff, what I've experienced is I'm actually writing sci-fi with a thriller bent, or the style, I'll call it the style of thrillers, which means, there's some tropes within the thriller expectation, which is things like, you said high stakes, Mark. The stakes have to be ramping up personally, professionally, psychologically throughout the entire book. Well, that can happen in a romance. That can happen in a horror novel. And usually in a thriller, we know one of the key components of the thriller style is that we know generally who the bad guy or girl is at the beginning or toward the beginning. Whereas in a mystery, that's reversed. We don't know who it is, and we're trying to find out who did something. It's the whodunit, right? So both of those can be styles that are plopped on top of any other actual genre, historical fiction, historical romance, horror, whatever. And so an example is like, The Expanse, which we just finished the last series of, which was terrible. Don't even talk to me about it. But the first book in that series, Leviathan Wakes, James S.A. Corey, it's actually two authors, did a great job making this sci-fi. Everybody would say it's sci-fi. It's probably hard science fiction because it's got a lot of grit and detail and stuff in there. But it's also a mystery because somebody dies at the beginning and they got to figure out who did it by the end. So it's like they're plopping this style. So they're mixing genres, if you will. But they're doing it in a way that their core audience, sci-fi fans, is not going to be upset because they're not missing any of those tropes. But they're also going to bring in people who enjoy the mystery. And of course, there's thriller aspects and romance and all that as well, like any good novel. But I don't know that's really an answer, guys. I just thought I would kind of throw that out there as something I'm thinking about. And as I go forward, I'm like, what am I really writing here? What is genre? What is this stuff?
Yeah. I thought that was pretty good analysis.
Yeah.
Kevin, you're still with us, right?
So we had, first of all, I think so. Am I with you? Can you hear me? Maybe?
Yes.
Hello?
Maybe
you
he's
can.
delayed.
Okay. So I'm
that's
sorry
the
about
story.
that. I mean, I get no indication that I'm not online, so I don't know. So I apologize to everybody if I'm glitching out. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Well, assuming that you're hearing me, Alyssa shared with us this the promo that Mark mentioned, the bookstory.com/RL/love stories. That was what came up earlier. In addition to that, we've had a lot of people asking in the comments about distribution, D2D print. So there's a little bit of there's a link here that you can go to, draftedigital.com/print_beta_invite to get a little bit of, to kind of get on board and maybe join that beta. We're working on a few things behind the scenes. There have been some challenges that have been kind of fun to encounter, and we're just trying to make that service everything it actually needs to be for D2D authors. So I promise you it is there. We're going to get to it. We're going to get that. It's running. It's working. I use it all the time. You got to.
I'm going to step in for a second because Nick, it sounds like Kevin's breaking up. He sounds like a Cylon. Is that what you're getting?
Yes, I'm definitely getting some Cylon-ish, some Cylonism, Cylonese.
Well, maybe continue that since as well, so he can figure out the hotel Wi-Fi. Maybe we can keep going on craft. I had some things to share related to specific exercises that I do that help me with the
awesome.
craft. Do you have
Nice.
some as well? Or do you want me to
I
start?
do. Yeah, I've very few. So hopefully you don't take the ones that I have.
Well, why don't you go first then?
Well, all I was gonna, when we talk about craft, there's what we've been talking about. What I've been talking about is this kind of lofty idealism of craft, and all that's important. But then, as a writer, when it comes down to it, you have to put words on the page. And so, I should say, probably the best book that I've found. And I'll say it's probably the best because it was the first one that I found, and so there's some sentimental value to it. But it is a really good book. If you get a chance, pick up Dwight Swain. He's the guy who taught Jack Bickham, so scene and structure guy. This was his teacher. It's called Techniques of the Selling Writer. And the old original one is like a big yellow, ugly university press looking book. And I think he taught at Oklahoma, actually. And it's just really granular and practical is what I love about it. And so one of the things he says in there for developing a character is picking an adjective of description and a noun of vocation. And so, for a character, obviously there's going to be more to it than that when you're drafting out your character. But as a jumping off point, he uses the adjective and the noun of a vocation to essentially launch all of his characters. And then the second thing that I really loved in his book, and I won't get into it here, is how he broke up all the chapters, how to write chapters. Everything is either a scene or a sequel. Which is a scene is a goal, a conflict, and a disaster. So something doesn't go right at the end of the scene. And then the sequel is almost like the breath, the inhalation. It's like, okay, we can kind of adapt. We're going to pick a new goal. And then the next scene is that new goal, and the disaster at the end of that scene is that goal not being realized. So he just does this over and over and over again. But he gets really granular. He even tells you how to use motivation reaction units, which is a horrendously named way to write individual sentences in your novel. And so what I loved about the book is he's got the high level stuff that he talks about, but then he really digs into some very specific, how do you write sentences that make sense? And he, putting it simply, for thrillers, which is kind of what he wrote a lot of pulp type fiction. He would just say sentences need to be linear. Obviously artistically we can do whatever we want as writers, but if you don't know, if you've never practiced this stuff before, start from square one. This has to happen before this has to happen. And so don't say this happened, but it happened because this happened. That's a sentence that doesn't quite work, And so he argues, say A happened and then B happened and then go from. So that's just one of, I should say 3 or so specific things, all from that book, Techniques of the Selling Writer. So if you're out there and just getting started with some of this stuff, I highly recommend that. It's a very easy to read one. And he did actually sell a lot of stories. So he knows his stuff.
I like what I like about that is you talked about the adjective, just descriptive, and then the noun vocation, because it was simplified so that you can kind of then drill down into it. But then at the high level, like a plot summary, now you can quickly go back and especially if you've got a lot of moving parts and characters, that's really helpful. Because one of the things, and I learned this from Dennis Hamill, who's a brilliant writer out of Brooklyn, New York, and his novels, every single book he's ever written. He's Pete Hamill's brother, but he is just brilliant. And he gave me this personal advice. I was very lucky to get it from him. Is he said, go for a walk with your characters and listen to what they say about what you're seeing. And so what I try to do when I'm trying to differentiate, sometimes I get like that vanilla voice that it's just Mark talking every time someone opens their
That's all my characters.
Bald Canadian guy. So what I try to do is I try to go for a walk with one character on my right in my mind and one character on my left. And I look really funny as people notice me talking to myself. But I listen to the character on my right and how they describe a sunset, how they describe a car going down the road, or they see somebody walking their dog, and how they see it, how they perceive it, and how they would describe it. And then the person on my left, how would they see it? How would they describe it? And in the nuances of the differences is where those is the different character traits, because maybe somebody's terrified of dogs. Their reaction is going to be different. Maybe somebody had a really bad thing happen that associates with sunset. So a sunset provides an emotional, visceral reaction that the other person's like, wow, it's beautiful. What are you talking about? And so that's something that I often do with characters. I either go for a walk with them if I can, or I try to have them describes the exact same thing. and see what the differences are. And that helps me with both the characterizations of who they are, their backstory, but also the voice, right? And the dialogue and the
Yes.
way they're going to say something.
Yeah.
I love that.
Am I back, by the way? Can you hear and
Yeah,
see
seems
me
like
now?
it is. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, well, let's take advantage of that while it lasts. So that's really interesting, Mark. And I think so. One of the things that I have done in the past to have I have little conversations like that with fictional characters often.
I do too, but they're just in my head. They're not actually characters in my books. Is that
Well, sometimes it
is that
is
okay,
helpful
or
to
should
say
I-
that stuff out loud, though, because no, Nick, no,
Not right now. No.
Uh,
I promise there was a real
I
person
plug in
there.
my AirPods. I walk around with my AirPods in, so that if I'm talking to one of these characters, nobody even questions it. They just think I'm as nuts as the next guy. So while I've got working everything, Alyssa actually popped in with a question asking, how do you figure out what the expectations are for your genre?
Well, unfortunately, it's not allowed, Alyssa. So no, we can't answer that.
We can't answer that. That's nepotism. See ya. I know for me, because Nick, you and I have a history when it comes to thriller writing. I was writing sci-fi when you and I first met, and you're the one actually you dared me to write a thriller. So you're
Goaded,
responsible, is what I'm saying.
Cajoled. Yeah, I
but to
take full credit
learn
for your success.
to learn the tropes of thriller writing, mostly for me came down to reading as many as I could get my hands on. That's more of the kind of mind sweep approach. I'm just out there plugging in on the grid and seeing what I find. What are some better ways? I mean, how did you discover the tropes of thriller writing?
You got anything, Mark? I probably don't have a whole lot to add, so why don't you jump in if you want?
Honestly, okay. read a lot. Like the expectations come from understanding it, and the only way you can properly understand it is to read it. I mean, the other thing you could potentially do is talk to people who read it and ask them what they look for, what they get out of it, and that should help you. But again, if you're not, I'd say this. I mean, if you're not willing to read in a genre that you're writing in, I would dare say you have no business writing in that genre if you're not. If you don't understand it enough from the point of view of the actual reader, because you're gonna be like missing the boat in a major way.
Yeah, I agree with that, man. I think obviously read, and I think that was sort of, and I kind of alluded to this idea that I would write this book on how to write a thriller, and it's still sitting there, in obscurity on my hard drive somewhere. But it was hard because I feel like I know intuitively what some of these tropes are, whereas I don't know them for the horror genre because I don't actually read horror, And so I wish there was something, maybe there is, if somebody knows about this, if there was some website or some book out there that just listed all of the different tropes and all the different genres that are typical for that genre, so typical historical fiction.
To write that book.
What's the expectation? Yeah, and I think the reason it doesn't exist, Kevin, is that exactly what Mark said. Like, you don't have any business writing in sci-fi if you don't know the difference between hard sci-fi and what would it be called, soft sci-fi?
There's like
squishy
nuts
sci-fi?
and bolts, and
Star Wars so sci-fi,
subgenres of sci-fi that I've lost track, and it's hard for me to say what some of my books actually fit into. Like, Ender's Game, it could be considered in a sense military sci-fi. I guess it is military sci-fi, but it's also more of it's all character driven, so it's not quite the same as other military sci-fi I've read. So anyway,
it's also coming of age. It's also right.
Yeah, I mean, you can read that novel. If you change the setting of that novel, it wouldn't change the story at all. Not necessarily, except for all the floating around in a battle room kind of thing. So Alexis Gray, another fine D2D employee, is popping in. All these folks, by the way, I think they all secretly, in some cases, in Alexis' case, not so secretly, want to be authors themselves. So we're all authors at D2D, basically. We're all there trying to win the same goals you guys are trying to win. So Alexis asks, while you're writing, do you go back to earlier parts of your writing to reread or edit it? Or do you save rereading and editing entirely for once the draft is done? And I can tell you, I use a process I stole and modified from Mark's good friend, Dean Wesley Smith, which I call it looping, and he calls it, what does he call it, Mark?
Writing into the dark.
Yeah, in Writing into the Dark, he's got a process that's called gosh, I can't remember. I started calling it looping, and now I can never remember what he calls it. But it's very similar. But he loops back every 500 words, reads and rewrites, and uses the momentum to just keep going forward. If you haven't read Writing into the Dark, that's an excellent book. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a pantser like me. But I took that, and what I do is I write my day's words. So I'll write, 2,500 words, we'll say. That's what my current daily target is. So I'll write my 2,500 words. Then the next day, I read and edit those 2,500 words before I write the next 2,500. And not only does that end up adding to my word count, so that I don't have to write as much at the end of the session, but it helps me get my head back into the story. It helps me kind of get back into the rhythm of it and the momentum of it. And the next thing you know, the next 2,500 words are fairly easy to write. But I like the 500 rule. I think that's probably a pretty good target in most cases. That's about as we discussed earlier, that's a little over a page. So that's a pretty decent amount of writing to do in one quick session, and then go back and edit and keep going. What about you guys? Do you guys do anything like that?
When I moved out here, I just changing rhythms and stuff. I started dictating a lot more, and I dictate in the car. And so, I'll drive to Hilo or whatever, which is a 25-minute. It's about a chapter and a half away, and a chapter and a half on the way back home. And so, I've got these 3 chapters that, which is roughly 3,000 words for me, and so that's kind of my daily count that I try to hit. And what I'll do is, because I'm such a phenomenal writer, I will draft the first draft of everything, and it's just pure drivel. I mean, it's literally just characters walking around doing nothing, and they all look and sound and feel like me, because
one of them gets shot in the neck.
Inevitably, one of them or many of them will get shot in the neck. That's called the neck shot trademark. That we all know that is the
shot in the neck Thacker.
Shot in the neck. And there's like no plot. There's nothing at all. And so what I have to then do is take these 80,000 words of crap and go through and drop in story and important plot devices. And so I love the fact that I'm not writing live, that writing so other people can read it immediately. I have to go back from page 1 and start dropping in like, okay, well, this happened in the last chapter. Who is it that said if there's a gun in the last scene, you have to introduce it in the first scene or something like that, right? It's Chekhov, all these things that I Chekhov's gun, right? If we have to, if we see it at the end, we want to drop it in the beginning. And so I know I'm kind of joking a little bit, but what I do is I'll go back and in this genre that I'm in, there's puzzles and not like actually not like a crossword in the middle of the book. That'd be cool, but like the thriller genre typically has puzzles, and I'm gonna put a Sudoku in my next one. And it's got these different things you have the characters have to solve. And so I can try to build that puzzle up in the outline stage up front, or I can just sort of know I want to have them figure out this clue. I don't really know what the clue is, but I'll just kind of say into my microphone, they figure out clue, and then next scene, And so then I have to go back and kind of drop it in. But by the time I get to the end, I've already got some things that I've written that I can use. Maybe there's an airplane crash that they found. Well, that can be part of the journey. So it's this really gross, ugly, squishy way of writing a book. It's not very linear for me at all, which is weird because it used to be a little more straightforward. And I'm finding, and this is a craft thing, as I'm getting better and as I'm practicing and challenging myself in new ways, I'm for whatever reason, maybe I'm a masochist, I'm doing it this way because I feel like it's producing better books. That may not be the case next year, but for now, that's kind of what I'm working with.
Well, here's the key thing,
Excellent.
And this is something I wanted to advise on that. Before I get there, Lynn, who is also, like me, a disciple of Dean Wesley Smith's writing workshops, says she calls it cycling, where you go back and do the looping, the cycling.
Cycling, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
Cycling was the word. So Nick, you get the 80,000 words out and then you go back. And I wanted to say this, Alexis, specifically, one of the risks of cycling or of that process is, well, provided you're always making forward progress, but not everyone always makes forward progress. They go back and they just rewrite and then they get stuck at the same place again. So I try, like Nick has, I want to get it out first because you can't edit or fix or revise or add life and characters and meaning and Sudoku puzzle pieces and all those things until you have something to work with. And that's one of the biggest challenges that I find a lot of writers will encounter is they want to get it so perfect. So chapters 1 through 3 are just impeccable, beautiful prose, the best prose you'll ever read, but they don't have chapters 7 through 30. And so I think that's one of the risks that you can run into in that process. I think cycling comes from the persistence. Like, you know, Nick says, I'm not done until I have 3,000 words and a chapter done that day, because you're always making forward progress. So provided you can cycle and go forward and you're always adding to it, not only removing, you're going to actually have a finished piece of work to work with, which I think is kind of important.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about craft here in practice. Like, I don't know how many times I've had to just drive back to Home Depot because the words weren't there yet. I've already gotten the stuff I need to get, but I'm turning around. I don't have the words yet. Like, got to get the words down. You know,
they love you there.
Craft comes down to. They know me there. They're like, hey, get the words in.
If you were a sculptor, you could not carve David unless you had the marble, and having the rough draft, the ugly 80,000 words of garbage is your marble. And then you go back, the editing and rewriting is where you shape that into a classic statue.
That's such a great story too. And I just want to know what the client was doing because I know clients. I mean, I've done web work and stuff. I wanted to hear the client who paid David and got to watch him as he worked. And he comes in every day and going, is that
this again?
What's that going to be? Is that an arm? Who's that? His leg? And David's like,
that,
leave me alone. Just leave me alone.
Is that really where you're going to put the bicep? I mean, if I'm no expert.
Yeah.
I have a good friend of mine has popped in. This is someone I've known most of my life. Carrie Dotson is asking, curious, generally, how long does it take for a completed story to get to the shelves? And that is a question I think mostly about, not just craft, but the regimented practice and discipline of writing. There are some wild stories about me out there, and they're all true, about some of the crazy things I've done experimental things to write a book in first 30 days and then 15 days. And then I wrote one in 1 day. So the answer to that question is kind of hard because it can be almost any time frame if you're willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears to do it. But the key here is discipline, coming back to it each day, or at least as regularly as you can manage. Some people don't get the luxury or the privilege of writing every single day. Life can be challenging, but if you are consistent and persistent, you can set your own time frame. I have a formula in my book, 30-Day Author. I give a whole formula for how to do this, and it's really just stupid simple. I mean, it is how many words are you trying to hit? What's your target? And then you would divide that by the number of days in your deadline. So if you want to write, 60,000 words in 30 days, you figure out exactly how many words you need to write per day. And if you're going to take weekends off or you're only going to write 3 days a week, that's going to factor into that as well. So that's one way to approach that. Do you guys have anything more coherent to add, I guess?
For me, I'm kind of on a schedule of about every 3 months, which is slower than I'd like, but faster than a lot of, guys from the traditional world. Yeah. It's doing this as a self-published author. It's challenging. You got to feed the beast. You got to constantly be uploading books and to kind of stay relevant, basically. But I've tried to go faster before, and the quality has suffered. Now, I'm not going to say that my quality is ever great, but it's worse than I allow if I try to go a little faster than that. And so what I've done, so 3 months probably start to finish is my answer. And so, but what that means is what I've done is I've developed a process where I'm not necessarily releasing them every 3 months. I may write a bunch and use marketing and advertising in the interim to keep the income steady. And then I might drop a series, a co-written series with 6 books, whatever, in rapid release kind of format that have already been written.
That brings up a good point. I only what I was talking about earlier was only about producing the manuscript and not did not include things like editing and rewrites and getting the cover design and that sort of thing. That stuff, I typically do that in a 15-day stretch too. So, I'll get into a pretty nice rhythm where I can write a book in 15 days, spend another 15 days getting it ready for prime time and releasing. But then I tend to want to schedule releases, 30 days out or something, so that I can kind of start getting some pre-orders and things like that. These days, I don't know that really helps anymore. There was a time where you wanted to have a bunch of pre-orders because it got you bumped up certain lists, but I'm not sure they applies anymore. You guys may know better than I do at this point. All right. So we had a question. This may be we're at 12:45, so we can't take too long to this. We need to wrap up. But this is not a craft, but I did get to it. I wanted to ask if you would have any advice to give regarding my situation. This is from Stipe on YouTube. And sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, my friend. I am currently promoting my books through Facebook. What other platforms for promoting should I try?
I am a huge fan of the price promotion sites like BookBub, where you can actually do ads as well as price promos. But writtenwordmedia.com, I highly recommend, because you can use Bargain Booksy, Free Booksy, Red Feather Romance. There's so many different tools there, and more affordable and a little bit more accessible in terms of, 1 in every 10 BookBubs gets accepted maybe, but you have better odds at Written Word Media. And I find personally that the investment on those targeted ads, because they've done all the work in identifying the audience, can be really, really beneficial.
Yep. Book Funnel also has some promotional tools. It's cross promotion stuff. It's mailing list stuff. So that's a good resource. I recommend when you do those cross promotions, focus first on building up your own platform, your own mailing list, and second on sales. Mostly because that is such a great platform for building your mailing list. And that mailing list will actually benefit you a great deal more than direct sales down the road. So. Nick, did you want to throw something in here?
Those are all good. Yeah, Story Origin. Somebody just mentioned in the comments. Good friend of ours, Evan Gao, over there running that. That's a good one too for those swaps. I'm the same as Mark. I love BookBub for their ads. They're a little more transparent than Amazon, I find, which I like, and Facebook even more so, because you can get very granular data. You can target exactly who you want, and it's a little more expensive because people aren't exactly warm. They're scrolling through Facebook, not through an Amazon book list or something, right? So you typically will pay a little more per click, but I generate a lot of clicks and a lot of sales through Facebook ads. And shameless self promo here. If anyone is wondering about BookBub featured deals, I get one every 2 months, pretty much on the dot now. And I've had that going for about 4. I got actually one coming up on Sunday for one of my books. So I wrote a book about it. Called BookBub Mastery, and it's a model. It's essentially a system that you put in place where you're submitting at certain times and making sure that you constantly are in front of their face so they can't ignore you. And eventually, the idea is you get accepted, assuming certain boxes are checked, like you've got a cover and reviews and all that. And I go through all that in the book. So if someone's out there, going, I wish I could get a BookBub featured deal, you can. Go check out the book. If you don't want to pay for it, send me an email. I'll give it to you for free. I don't care. I'm trying to get the information out there. But BookBub Mastery is the name of that one. And that's obviously because BookBub, as far as dollars spent, is the absolute cheapest way to get eyeballs on your book, period.
Excellent. All right. So we're running a little over. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. But thanks, guys, first of all, for being here, but also for covering for me when I went all glitchy.
We just stood there silently. We were like...
I figure.
Yeah, we panicked. We didn't know what to do, Kevin.
I kept looking at the voices in my head.
Like most of the communities I belong to, when I'm not there, it just ceases to exist. So for those of you who are tuning in, either here on Facebook or on YouTube or via the podcast, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Go to youtube.com/draftedigital. Also pop over to Facebook and go to facebook.com/draftedigital. And follow us there. We are constantly creating new content, uploading new things. We got a whole bunch of stuff coming down the pike. that you're going to want to tune into. Make sure you bookmark d2dlive.com so that you can get a little countdown to when we have these live sessions. We do these at least once a month, and we'll occasionally do special interviews. I got one coming up with Mary Robinette Kowal here in the next month or so, and that's going to be an interesting one. I love her. She and I go way back at this point. We mentioned this earlier, and it was a much longer URL, but if you're interested in the D2D print, go to draftdigital.com/print beta. I assume that still works. So you can go there, sign up to be a part of the beta. We are kind of doing some things behind the scenes to make that work better. And so, a lot of URLs, man. I gotta boil these down. Draftdigital.com/blog is where you're going to find things like what I mentioned earlier, the blog on characterization, and we got a blog about point of view and protagonists up there right now. And finally, tune in to selfpublishinginsiders.com. That's right now, it leads to the blog, and we're going to be creating a landing page for this stuff eventually that is purely about the podcast, but that's where you'll be able to look and listen and read along with these broadcasts, the YouTube shows, the podcast itself, and a transcript of these things. So, whew, that is it for this round of Self-Publishing Insiders. Thank you so much to Mark Leslie Lefebvre and Nick Thacker for joining me. Thank you to you for joining all of us, and take care of yourselves, and we will see you all next time.